Media artist Patrick Lichty returns to the Plutopia podcast this time as we discuss the current state of digital art.
Digital art is finally getting accepted in the what I'd say the high art ecosphere. Between museums and galleries and collectors and that sort of thing. And there's been different names for this stuff, like cyber art. That's kind of where we started into this. Then new media, then post-internet art, then now we're kind of getting into digital art, which is there's a lot of stuff with the guarantee of it, and this has been the big thing with digital art. How can you guarantee this as something that you can collect or sell? And that's has to do with verifying it on the blockchain.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Plutopia podcast featuring yours truly, Jon Lebkowski, and my partner in crime over there, Scoop Sweeney. And our guest today is Patrick Lichty. He's a contemporary media artist. He's an educator, a professional writer and researcher. He's an expert in augmented, virtual reality, and drones, and public speaker, curator, all those things. And, I think of you as overall as a great digital artist, Pat. Yeah. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's I have a Instagram at patlichty _ and I'm starting on. I've been working on a new body of AI work called Endangered Species, and I'm basically kind of using AI to comment on sea rise and basically using the tool that's probably causing it to make a commentary on it. So the piece I've got out right now is a Lincoln Memorial that's up to its ankles in water.
Well, a good first question. I mean, we should get to that, but a good first question for people who don't know is, how do you characterize digital art? What does it mean to say that art is digital art?
Yeah, you know what? So I'll try to give the non-phone book a reason, a phone book version, because there have been just lots of different names of this. I started doing this in the late 80s when I decided to quit being a computer engineer, and my mom was an artist and all that sort of thing. I wanted to do this, and everybody said, be practical. Don't stop being an engineer. But of course, I'm never, artists are never practical people. But anyhow, I'd kind of say, of course it isn't finger painting, but it's like that's another type of digital art. But what happens is that in general, you're using some sort of digital technology, usually some sort of computation or something like that. I also do things with old video transmission things for ham radio, which that's digital as well. In other words, something that has some sort of use of technology that comes around with ones and zeros and bits and that sort of thing. But let's a lot of people kind of consider that being computer art of some, using a computer or a or something that's computational, like a cell phone or whatnot involved with that. The thing I think is really interesting, and this will get into what we're going to talk about today, I think, is how digital art is finally getting accepted in the what I'd say the high art ecosphere. Between museums and galleries and collectors and that sort of thing. And there's been different names for this stuff, like cyber art. That's kind of where we started into this. Then new media, then post-internet art, then now we're kind of getting into digital art, which is there's a lot of stuff with the guarantee of it, and this has been the big thing with digital art. It's how can you guarantee this as something that you can collect or sell? And that's has to do with verifying it on the blockchain. And the thing is that you find that a lot of digital art these days, is, kind of pointing towards, things with an NFT guarantee on it, or notice I'm not saying NFT art, or, things like that. And, that kind of turns away from a much larger set of things. But usually digital art is, um, basically having to do with art that has digital devices somewhere in the whole thing. So I hope that wasn't too confusing.
No, not too much. I'm
Well,
recalling. Well, I mean, it's not confusing at all to
yeah.
me.
Okay.
But I was also thinking about James Bridle's thing, the new aesthetic.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Um,
So how has that evolved? I assume you've been kind of plugged into that. That was a few
sure,
years ago, right?
sure. I was watching James, really closely on that. And a lot of the new aesthetic had to do with that's actually very interesting. I think AI is kind of a new version of that. How machine vision aestheticizes, you know, um, what it sees, and how can we use that as a way to express ourselves artistically. Like, say, for example, there's a guy, John Raffman, who did a project called Nine Eyes. And what he did with that is that it was definitely a new aesthetic project, in which he went out and saw glitches in um, Google Earth, you know. So he'd go out and he'd find these glitches out in Google Earth and kind of curate these in, and or basically see things like, there was like a physical assault or something like that happening, in the scene that was on Google Street or whatnot. So, these are things, these are all subsets, these are kind of how digital technology and culture, affect our perception of the world, our aesthetics, and so on.
Is there
So
a line to be drawn? I mean, what you just described was sort of a curation. Is there a line to be drawn between curation and actual production of art?
well, think about this. Think about AI, right?
Yeah.
So, in other words, the one thing that, there's an argument that, our creation of AI images art. There's a lot of people who say that it isn't, and I have a funny outlook on that, but I might get that in a second. Um, you know, um, there are people who wind up saying that, AI art is having to do with, curation of things that are generated by the algorithms, and somebody with, the same database of trained information, the same seed, you know, um, number for the randomization of, of your image, and the same prompt could conceivably, very unlikely, but get something, very similar. So, is that, um, you know, um, digital art? I think there are a couple of things involved in that. I'll get philosophical for a moment. In other words, I think we're getting down to the idea of art as being something that, is maybe a human expression of, the life that's lived, and and maybe curating images from AI, um, in a certain context might be that, but I remember in the late 90s, I did a large digital portrait, from an image of someone I had found online, and reworked it a lot and blew it up. And and that's an issue in itself, kind of the found image, that goes into, like, appropriation art. But somebody asked me, they said, what program did you use to make that piece? And I told them, well, I'll tell you what program I used, if you tell me what oil paint and canvas and brushes you use to do yours. And I said, well, it isn't so much the tool, but the person using the tool. And it's better to have a tool than to be a tool, as they say. And you know, but I think we're much closer to that idea of you know, uh button press art, and what questions does that bring up? Um so um yeah, I'll just put this out as a little provocation. This is the reason why I'm starting to take some of my AI pieces and I'm starting to do pastels from them.
Well, I have a number of friends who are long-term artists who, that was their bread and butter. They is,
Yeah,
people paying for their art, and some of them have been very irate about not so much digital art, but the AI, uh,
sure.
appropriation of their own work.
Yep.
And uh, how do we resolve that problem? You don't want to take someone else's lifeblood that they've put into their art
No.
and turn it into something else.
No. Hmm. I think there are a number of different things. I think on one hand, we look at, late stage capitalism, that just basically wants to be able to find some sort of technology to turn around a quick buck, right? And so this is great, AI is great for those folks, who really don't care about aesthetics, who really don't care about, the cultural implications. I think that, the rise of digital, creativity in the 90s, that concerned a lot of people because of the fact that, creation became much more flexible. In other words, you could change things much quicker, and this sped up, digital creation. But there's still a lot more of, I'd say, like an individual's intent behind it, and I think this is kind of where we're at. But I'd say, the most idealistic thing would be to say, we need to make sure that there's still a culture in which there is a value to, you know, to genuine work or authentic work, and that's a big word these days. And I'm also kind of optimistic at seeing, the lawsuits being brought out by artists, and there are, I would say I just saw something yesterday about the fact that you can go out on Meta and you can have you have to dig really deep, but you can fill out a form to have Meta AI exclude your work from their latent space. And so um, I think that that's encouraging, but the people, with the algorithms, say, oh, you can pull these things off. There's also, but they make it extremely hard. And I think there's also programs like Nightshade, which try to, infect, your images going into the thing and try to jam the system. Um, I think that there are things that are, that have some optimism for artists, but I think at the moment, we are going through that moment of change, one of those disruptive moments of change in which, culture is, just culture, and people are catching up to the moment where, all this stuff is happening, and the people with the bucks and the technology are hoovering up stuff, and and just while they can, until everybody else catches up to them.
I found myself wondering about the money side of this.
Hmm.
Obviously, if you're a practicing professional artist and you're depending on your production of art for an income, you have to figure out how to sell, how to market, and how to,
Yeah.
attract buyers for your art. And I know that at one point in the realm of digital art, NFTs were going to be one way that people could do that, that basically you could
Still
sell,
is.
which to me,
Still
it seemed to me like an NFT was sort of like getting a lot of prints made of a work you've done and then signing the prints and making those available. It seems like you could do something like that with an NFT. So you own an instance of the same piece of art, I guess, when you buy the NFT. But how
Yep.
is that evolving? Are people still doing? Are people
Oh yeah.
still using NFTs?
It's like Second Life. It's still out there. It's still all out there. Everybody says like, oh, whatever happened to Second Life? Well, it has a very loyal ecosystem. So say for example, Sotheby's and Christie's is still, get all an NFT is a guarantee, right? So basically you're paying so much for a guarantee, for that digital image or that even, it's like a certificate of authenticity. So, but there are a lot of museums that are that are using this system of provenance, to guarantee digital works and that sort of thing. And it's still going on out there. Actually, there's my primary gallery, DAM, and some other galleries that I deal with, like Extended Art and at IFAC, in Athens, they're doing NFT stuff. I might be doing a show with I might be in a show doing NFT work with Extended in Berlin, of my wrist cam photos, and yeah, I did in 2003. I think that it's the NFT in itself is still a viable instrument for kind of guaranteeing a value proposition at this point in time. It's within that particular community, that needs this, guarantee of certain, of valuation and being able to, check it. It's in the high art world. It's with digital art, it's still very much involved. There's are you familiar with a guy named Casey Rees?
I don't think so.
He and a friend of his at when they were going to MIT, they wrote this programming language called processing, and it's still very much it's kind of like C for artists and artists and designers. So it's kind of like I'd say kind of like dumbed down C, but it's very popular and it's been around for about 20 years. And Casey is at he's head of art and design at UCLA, and he has a NFT platform called Feral File, which is supposed to be a place that's kind of like an honest honest place to do NFT work, and I think it's the MoMA right now that that Feral File is doing doing a project with. So I think that's really kind of saying that there are a few key players, NIIO with Pal Welder, Feral File, Object.com. I think using the Tezos chain, there's a small devoted group of people in the high art world who are very much engaged with an NFT with NFT technology and blockchain technology as a way to guarantee valuation of digital art.
Yeah, I'm thinking about sometimes I think of digital art as being more ephemeral, though it doesn't necessarily have to be. I mean, the production of the piece of art could result in a tangible thing that you could hang on your wall, but it could also result in just a collection of bytes, right? And what do
Right.
you do with that collection of bytes if you don't have You can't really hang that on your wall.
Yeah, but I guess what happens is that the NFT is supposed to kind of materialize it, right? In other words, it's something that's saying that here's this ephemeral thing, and here's a guarantee, here's a guarantee on the blockchain that it exists and you own it. So in a way, it's kind of materializes the immaterial. It's like, in other words, like, yeah, this is this digital file, but it exists and you own it, and it's worth at least this much, and here you are, and I think that's what NFTs kind of do, you know. And there are all kinds of, digital NFT frames these days, that you can buy, and things like that. So it's I think the other thing you think of, it's like what is it? Yves Klein, who used to do stuff like it's selling selling a little statement that says that this happened, and he's throwing gold leaf into the river, and so I think that this isn't necessarily something new, but guaranteeing the ephemeral is, I think, something that, NFT tries to do within the art ecosystem, that hadn't been done before.
I've been working in the digital realm for a long, long time. Made a great living doing that.
Mhm.
But I've also remained uh, kind of a fan of the analog world. Look
Oh yeah.
on my wall are all these vinyl albums and reel-to-reel tapes and things, and I just love something about the maybe it's just because it's an old technology that a lot of people in the digital world think is garbage and should just be ignored. But I love resurrecting things, and I also love the fact that it's a physical item that doesn't rely on the internet
Sure.
to disseminate.
Right, right. So, and you're absolutely right. And let me maybe this is a little bit much to go on at that once, but I think this is kind of a genealogy that's really worth getting into. Is that like 2006, 2007, the Artform magazine, one of the big art magazines, had something called, it had a article called "The Digital Divide" by Claire Bishop, saying that, we just need to we in contemporary arts, we just need to take digital art, we just need to just chuck it in the fireplace and just say, get out of here. You don't belong here. You don't have things that we can conserve and collect and that sort of thing. So, and then I'll just say briefly, post-internet artists, after that wound up, making paintings and objects which, talked about digital culture and that sort of thing. That's fine. But I think what's interesting is then the NFTs starts, and the artists guaranteeing their work with NFTs was interesting. But there are artists, and there are artists, there are curators, there are critics. Like I'd say one of the most foremost curators in this area is like Tina Rivers Ryan. Well, I'd say, first Christiane Paul at the Whitney, and then Tina Rivers Ryan at who was at the at Buffalo's Albright Knox, and the thing gallery, and then she basically went over, and she's now head of Artform magazine that had this article in 2007, saying that art, and she's a had a show of NFTs at the Albright Knox. And the interesting thing is that now, where are you going with this, Patrick? Last year, there's a group of artists from that started about in the 70s or so called the Algorists. And these were people who basically used pen plotters to do work. And I'm kind of a grandchild of that group and that sort of thing. But what happens is that there's an artist who was going to be 100 years old last year, Vera Molnar, who was a pioneer in this area and that sort of thing. And she died at 99. And, but the thing is that, she was known for, doing all these works from code and using plotters and, with a little bit of chaos in them. One of the things said 1% chaos. And what's interesting is that, before she died, she was, I think, at 98. It was in the Venice Biennial, the world's, most, upmost, art exhibition. I think it's, really interesting that, Tina basically at Art Forum, remember, that, 10 years ago was saying, let's get rid of digital art. She's featuring Vera Molnar on the front cover, and from works from there's some great collectors like Anne and Michael Spalder, and these pieces were from their collection, and that magazine winds up in the Gagosian Gallery, on the bookshelf. So the thing is that you've got, in the middle of the aughts, the contemporary art field saying, hey, what can we do with this to, basically, digital art starting to sweep the contemporary, which I think is a really significant thing, and so, but in so doing, you have a lot of artists, who are, like the early digital artists, they're doing pen plotter stuff, they're doing drawings. Harold Cohen, say, for example, who created the machine, Aaron, as an artificial intelligence, painting robot that he did to do his work. He's got two major shows, one on at the Whitney and one on in London right now. And the thing is that, how much of it is digital, how much of it is like kind of like digitized Harold and that sort of thing. But, I think the thing that's interesting is that sure, there's NFTs, with, JPEGs, et cetera, but there's a lot of people who have done in the digital genealogy who have done amazing, amounts of physical work. Hey, look, there are ceramic 3D printers. That's digital. So I mean, I think what goes on is that I think we're in a period of time now in what it means to be a digital artist is being challenged. And, the collector base and that sort of thing is being challenged, we had festivals where all this stuff was being shown, but, could you collect this stuff? I think now, the contemporary art world has been, it has now gotten the mind virus of digital art. And I think it's really spreading quickly.
Seems to me that like art comes from here, right? And it comes from here.
Yeah.
And if you're an artist, you could have artists who are both digital and analog. It sort of just kind of depends on where they are in their heads and in their emotions and in their expressive thinking. I was thinking about Banksy there. Banksy sort of veers over into digital sometimes, though a lot of what he produces is analog.
Mm-hmm. And sure, I mean, it was like the other day I was at I'm here in Winona, Minnesota, and we have actually a remarkably nice museum called the Minnesota Marine Art Museum, and it's actually a really good museum. And I was there, and there was a workshop on doing oil pastels, and you know what I did? I popped out my cell phone. I popped up one of my little AI pieces that I'm doing now from my kind of like Ansel Adams like stuff, and I sat down with oil pastels, and I banged out a piece, and I said, oh my God, I guess I'm still an artist. So, but another really fantastic artist who's you know, doing a lot of great stuff, that's highway material is a guy named Joseph DeLapp. And, he's, um, you know, he has sculptures, like made up of mice. He's also done, performances like, and one of my favorite things was Quake Friends, it was like online in Quake. And everybody was, in deathmatch, but, they were going through a Friends screenplay, which the script, and it's like Ross would get blown away and then he'd come back, and Rachel, whatever. But what he's doing now is that he's doing these paintings based on his mouse movement as he's playing. It's really some really, really smart work. So and so the thing is that do you call that digital art? I mean, it definitely has a digital process involved with it. He's painting, as he's playing a game. Is, I think what happens is what you're talking about here is this idea of intentionality of, how you're dealing with the process, how you're dealing with the technology, and how it's creating, the intention for your expression.
To get back to AI art,
Yeah.
really writing a prompt could be considered, an aesthetic act, an act of art. And the thing that's generated is just a manifestation of sort of what was in your head when you decided to write the prompt, And I would think that the realm of AI art could really expand quite a bit with just that, just that sense of things, the sense that really art is a way of kind of trying to get something that's inside of you and externalize it.
Yeah.
And one means to do that could be an instruction to a thing that executes the instruction.
Well, I mean, think about Saul LeWitt. He has all these paintings that are made from instructions. And then, there's, the Fluxus artists and the poetry concrete artists. I actually feel that AI is a form of concretized writing. So, I mean, one group that I am, that I hang out with a lot, there's a lot of people with the electronic literature, community. And, let's say, so I'm in this creative digital media program here at Winona, and we're kind of a sister program to the Center for Digital Narrative at University of Bergen. So we've got, my colleagues, Davin Heckman and Talon Mehmet, and, working with people like Jason Nelson and Scott Rettberg, who runs the center. And the thing is that, us with other, a lot of other practitioners, we're really looking at this idea of AI as a concretized form of writing, and so, really what's going on here is it's a visual manifestation through digital processes of writing. And so I think you're dead on when you're talking about that, so I'm actually I'm actually finishing up a paper on steganography. So the idea of like taking data and hiding it, in a digital image and then bring it back out. What I've been doing is I'm probably going to be presenting this in about a month. Is AI is steganography. So in other words, going and putting my prompt in and then using and then getting the image and then seeing what happens when I use Midjourney to decode it and give me a prompt back. And I'm trying to see what it tells me, so see whether it tells me what I told it.
I always believe that anyone could be an artist, but perhaps some should probably avoid that. I'm one of those people. I tried, doing digital art a number of times, even back in my days as a coder, And yeah, I tried coding things, and I realized that I was not meant to be shared as
Well,
an artist. But what I did find is I found an art for myself that is a recording of sound.
yeah.
People talking, people speaking, people singing, and nature. I did a whole series of recordings in nature of just very expensive, high resolution microphones just
Mm-hmm.
out in the forest or by a water, uh, 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 you know, body of water like the on the ocean, and just letting it record and seeing what comes up. And I considered that my version of art. I don't know if I could sell it or if anyone would want it, but everybody has a way of, I think, of um, finding something that they can do that's artistic in some way.
That
Oh,
sounds a
well,
lot like the work of the composer Carl Stone, who
mhm.
wanders around in cities and records city sounds and then works those into digital composition.
Yeah, I mean, let's see here. Let's see here. I mean, the area of sound art is absolutely huge. And let's see here. Go on just a little bit. I'm looking for a couple things. So um let's see here. I guess.
I
Oops.
got really quiet for a minute, but
Yeah. Well, that's kind of funny that we're talking about sound art, and then all of a sudden we get really
yeah,
um
sound art and visual art are both experiencing I don't know, I guess you could say a revitalization through digital manifestations.
yeah, I mean, I also think about, artists like was it Jack Cardiff, who does, the recording of these tours through spaces, but I think they're as much about sound as they are, the recorded visual, as well. And yeah, that's definitely it's definitely a thing. And I think that's one thing that we tend to like overlook. Like, say, for example, like um in the Fluxus movement, so much of it was, involved in making noise. I mean, Yoko Ono, of course, she was very good at that and still is. And it's I think yeah,
And
this
she
is
was also a digital artist. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
she was also a
Yeah.
visual artist who produced music. I
Yeah.
mean, she was kind of amazing. She didn't get the credit she deserved. We actually recently had a podcast where we mostly discussed Yoko Ono. We
Really.
interviewed someone who had written a biography of Yoko,
Hmm.
and it's really kind of amazing her body of work. And to
Yeah.
me, that's an example of what I was talking about earlier, is a person who really doesn't get too fixated on a particular medium, but they just sort of like follow their head, and the media will follow.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of me too. It's like, actually, something that's actually a great volume on this is there's an Oxford handbook on sound art, actually. So you can't get much better than that, can you? And
Tell
so
tell us a little bit about, so what is your position at Winona, and kind of what are you teaching? What are the kinds of things that you're doing there?
well, I'm at Winona State. We're the flagship of the Winona, of the Minnesota State, state system. I'm in mass communications. My major is creative digital media that I'm in with a couple really great scholars, Talon Mehmet and Davin Heckman, who've been around in electronic media for a long time. Talon was a um, was an artist in San Francisco before he went further into the literary genre. And I run the interactive area. So Talon runs the video track and I run the interactive track. And
Sounds like Act Lab.
sort of, yeah, and very
Hmm.
much so. And so what we wind up doing is that what was it? I taught students. I love After Effects, as a program. So I taught them how to do dynamic masking and things like that. And so the next year in Interactive One, basically wrote some like a like a some VJ software, and I had them think about surrealism, and we got a couple I both gave them a couple white umbrellas and a and a projector, and I said make some surrealist work, but project it on the underside of these umbrellas, and you can put them on their side, you can hang them or whatever. And so, we were really kind of thinking about like the surrealist notion of dreams and that sort of thing, and making video and digital content and mapping it to these umbrellas and making like a little physical interface, instead of just a keyboard, in other words, like you've got like maybe um, a an old landline phone, and for each of the buttons, each of the buttons plays a video or something like that. So, that's one of the things that we've wound up doing in my classes. And, so, another one was using like the Unity game engine to create like like a digital cinema space and things like that. We do a lot of get some robotics out and running, and augmented reality, virtual reality, and that's we do a little something different we do something a little different every year.
So I know you have to have kind of a lesson plan worked out.
Oh yeah, you
Um,
do.
yeah, a curriculum, but at the same time, to what extent do you allow for improvisation and experimentation in that kind of work?
Well, I mean, a lot. So basically, you just give them kind of like a technological and conceptual framework, and then see what they do with it. So in other words, I said, okay, we're gonna use this kind of like this video organ, with a physical interface that we're going to build, and then here's a couple umbrellas, and then let's explore, let's explore dreams and surrealism and that sort of thing, and then see how they manifest themselves inside in these umbrellas, you know and
So
so mhm.
you're an academic and an artist at the same time. How do these two things interact with each other?
Well, that's kind of funny because I was not I was um I was doing scholarship along with my contemporary art for 15 years before I ever became an academic. So what happens is that the the added point really came in with the teaching. So I was writing, getting published and doing exhibitions and that sort of thing, but then, I just kind of got tired of the ups and downs, and decided to get something a little bit more stable. And I'm kind of figuring that it was probably just slightly more stable, and wasn't as stable as I thought it was going to be. But nevertheless, it one of the things that I went into academia for was that I missed, working by myself or with an assistant in my studio. I missed having the conversations that I had in school. And I think it's, really interesting to, work with students and see how they come to things, how the things that you talk about, see where they spark, and I think and I think that gives me ideas. And I think what happens is that as opposed to being in the studio or, doing this, from a more, just, from the studio based thing, is that I think that being an academic allows you to, share and create more ideas than maybe you had, on your own. And you were talking about, Act Lab, our friend Sandy Stone, that ran it. I think that she would probably agree with that.
I was just thinking about, so a few years ago, you and I collaborated on a panel at South by Southwest called the
Yeah.
Cyborg Gaze.
Yeah.
Have you continued to think about that? Do you have any new thinking about? I mean, we were kind of talking about, part of it was about the cyborgization of any and all of us,
Yeah.
and how we're enhanced by technology, and how there's a cyborg vision of the world and the effects of that vision. Do you think about that much these days?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think James Brittle, took that,
Yeah.
did that to the next step. There's also, let's see here. I don't think he's with us anymore, but there was an artist and scholar by the name of Harun Faraki who talked about the camera as an apparatus, and operational images. In other words, like photography that isn't being done for necessarily narrative means, and so say, for example, like drone footage, this is, these are and back in the early 20th century, when they were looking into the idea of biometrics as a justification for eugenics and things like that, saying that how can we codify a human being into certain ways, by doing like visual systemization, of certain traits and things like that. But I think that I'm kind of going off the rails there for a moment, but getting back into this, I think that consider, if you will, the idea of AI and the way it scrapes all of our sort of all of our images that we either create or we shoot or whatever that's online, that it can go find, as a form of, cyborg metavision, and then we kind of look at that as a potential or latent space, of processed cyborg vision that we draw back upon. And I think that's a really interesting perspective. What do you think?
Well,
Well,
the cyborg has always been especially in science fiction, a human that's been fitted with all sorts of extra apparatus to do things. Yeah, those things. We
Yeah.
have a company here, Elon Musk's company, Neural, was it
Neuralink.
Neuralink, right?
Yep.
And that's a whole different thing. And I I really don't care for Elon very much.
No.
But see, knowing and having family members who are disabled have,
Yeah.
have problems like, you know, that could be helped by a Neuralink thing. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of on,
Ooh.
on both sides of the issue on that. But it sounds creepy, but when you see that an individual who is a quadriplegic is now able to function in the world,
Yeah.
that gives you hope. But hoping that Elon doesn't get some of his weird
Yeah.
projects involved in that, because that's kind of, anything he does is kind of scary.
Yeah.
not gonna let him inside my brain.
Well, you know what? Think about it this way. So, I'm kind of at the edge of low vision. So, I mean, I've had retinitis pigmentosa most of my life and that sort of thing. I've been fighting it, and it advances a little bit from time to time. And yeah, I think of our old friend Bruce Sterling, who did the Schismatrix trilogy, and basically that talking about the shapers versus the mechanists. And so, Elon is most definitely a mechanist, right? By going and implanting the electrodes to hook yourself up to the computer and all that sort of thing. But, the thing that we're starting to see now is we're starting to see stem cell, technology being able to go in and regenerate, things like maybe I'm hoping that sometime I might be able to get stem cell injections to regenerate my retinas, and that's most definitely a shaper technology, in other words, like, that where like, in Bruce's stories, the mechanists were the people who were using, hard tech, to, extend, human life and human capability. And then the shapers, the ones who are using, who are using biotechnology to extend extend the, to cyborg the human species. So the thing is that going back to John for a moment, thinking about, you know, what is, what is a cyborg? I think that, another thing is I think that Bruce has been kind of on the mark again, about, maybe where we're going between kind of like, mechanist and shaper ways of cyborging, you know, as far as like how it affects the actual human body.
How does that relate to art?
Hmm. Um, well, the artist Orlan, who, got plastic surgery that reshaped her body to look like, various styles of painting and that sort of thing. It's like the idea is so um if you look at the mechanist version, can colleague, Stellark, who did the third arm, that would he could control with his arm, or was it ping body, where he hooked his body up to the internet, where people could control his body through clicking on parts of his body on the net. That's kind of a mechanist, viewpoint of art. Now maybe the shaper viewpoint is maybe more like um some friends like Yonat Zur and Oron Katz, from Symbiotica, and who did like the and also Paul Vanus at the Coalesce Lab at University of Buffalo, doing things like making grown um leather jackets, and Paul did a thing that I really liked, is that, he was basically taking, and looking at the idea of exploring, scent and odor and that sort of thing from manufacturing, like fake, manufacturing, laborers' sweat, and that sort of thing, So there's also things where, like, like white blood cells would be fighting and all that sort of thing. So I mean, it's there's and this is all technical. It may not be digital, but I think that's if we're thinking about technology and art, we're not necessarily talking about digital art, but I think that we can talk about um the idea of technology and art in this mechanist shaper kind of dyad, as to how couple of many ways that we can use technology, reflect on our being as human beings. And
I've seen. uh,
the only thing I'll wind up saying is I think that, art is a lot about subjectivity and, how we frame things and how we frame intent. And I think that's an important part of the whole thing.
I've seen people refer to certain chefs as an artist because their food is something new and very different from what came before. Can a chef be an artist?
Sure, why not? Yeah, exactly. I think what happens is that um there's all sorts of, definitions, that sort of the creativity and all that. But, if you take, um, if you're talking about something like that, there's a Thai artist by the name of Rikrit Tiravanija, who would go out and do these performances of where, the food brings them together, as a relational work. He'd go and he'd make like a big thing of pad Thai and bring people together. And so this is what they'd call, relational performance. So the thing is that um, I think that art is really about this, this focus of intention. And the thing is like, what's the function of it? In other words, is that, are you looking at something that's questioning the notion of food, or the notion of the function of food, or, and that sort of thing? It's like institutions, have have their threads of stories, all their histories and that sort of thing, and what they address in culture. So I mean, so say for example, is that chef trying to say something, within the culinary world, or are they trying to say something as something that's challenging the notion of art? I think I think you're absolutely right. I think it's just really the matter of what conversation are you getting in, and you're engaging with,
There are some podcasters who think of it as an art form, and I don't know if ours is. We might be like the Norman Rockwell of, I don't know, but everyone may be able to be artful in some way.
Yeah, it's like, well, maybe we can be the Beeple.
Oh, this is going to totally change my work on this podcast. I'm going to start thinking of it as my art.
You should.
Well, it is. I mean, it
Yeah.
absolutely is.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing is that, I mean, art, so the thing is maybe your medium is you're shaping ideas and that sort of thing. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, was it Radiolab? How,
Yeah.
in a way, they're, challenging the form of the documentary, documentary sort of thing, as opposed to like Ira Glass, right?
Yeah, the original concept of Plutopia was built around curation of art installations at our Plutopia events many years ago. But we had come from this thought about the idea of pluralist utopias. And one thing about like the subjectivity of art, it's like it represents an individual, like the individual artist's relationship with the world and how they express that. And that is sort of like their utopia, So if we think in terms of pluralist utopias, we all sort of have our own way of relating to the world, and we try to optimize that so that it becomes a kind of utopian experience for us.
Yeah.
And I don't think that we have got away from that. And as we got away from having the big events and having the big art installations and so forth. And now we're a podcast where we talk about things, but we curate our podcast in a way that I think represents an aesthetic of sorts.
Sure. And I'm not going to run with this, but I think the word curation has just really been just been beaten around, like mad, until sometimes it doesn't mean anything.
But I think curation is a form of art.
Sure. And I think what happens is that, when you take that gesture and you form it through intention, and then you connect it to some part of culture, I mean, when we talk about art and galleries and museums and things like that, that's really, to tell you the truth, that's a pretty narrow lens. And where the curators and so on get to say this is art, and this usually has to do with what's considered as culturally valuable, in like a museological sense. But on the other hand, if you want to broaden that sense of shall we say curation, we can get really really broad. I mean, I think, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm getting fired up. We've run out of time, and I'm kind of feeling fired up because I'm thinking, actually a museum or an art gallery is itself, the curation of that thing is itself an art form.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, but it isn't something that you can buy and hang on a wall. So I mean, I think what we have is we have these practices, and then we have, these practices, and then we have these other things that are just kind of funny,
Thank you so much, Patrick, for
Always.
joining us today. This has been wonderful. And we'll do it again soon.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. I wish you could see me waving goodbye, but
I'll wave for us both there. Bye-bye.
there you go. Okay, bye.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lepkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.